Calling the Snoqualmie Valley School District Board of Directors meeting to order. Today is July the 9th, 2026. I would ask you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is 1.02, approval of the agenda. Is there a motion? So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. So the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the June 25th, 2026 regular board meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Next item is communication and recognition.
And none this evening, Rob.
Okay, we don't have anything. Moving on to the next item is public comment. We have not received any public comment, either written or anyone sign up to speak here on today. So moving on to the next item is approval of the consent agenda. Before going through the process, we'd like to share any donations to the district, and we do not have any to list today. So is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is information and report items. Is 4.01, budget review.
Ryan's first, Andrea, sorry. Ryan, do you need your?
No. Thank you.
We had it switched to you.
Oh, it's different on mine. I apologize. It does say on the online version, it does say.
Oh, it does say that?
Mount Si choir program information that we promised from last time. I apologize.
All right,
So I'll invite
we'll-
Andrea up.
Yes, we'll switch that to.
Hello, everyone. I'm here to just share on behalf of Cabinet some changes to our music FTE here at Mount Si High School. First, I'd just like to acknowledge the advocacy that we've heard from our staff and our families and our community members. We really appreciate that because we all agree that music education is meaningful in the lives of our Mount Si High School students, and we want to continue that forward. Our goal has always been throughout this process to preserve the strength and quality of the music program, but we have to balance that with fulfilling our responsibility as a district to staff our programs equitably and sustainably within our district. So we know that our music department is very competitive and we want them to continue to be, but just like our music program, a lot of our co-curricular programs all have those desires. You know, our DECA families feel the same way, our culinary families, our FFA families. And so in looking at the data, it's really about what is sustainable and what is affordable and what's equitable within our system. So I'm going to share with you tonight just kind of the details of how this change came about. So we do have a reduction in enrollment in our choir as well as our music electives here at Mount Si High School. And so we met with the teachers in the program to let them know that this was coming. You know, the worst thing that we ever have to do as administrators is reduce staff, existing staff of people that have current full-time jobs and reduce their FTE or eliminate their FTE. So we wanted to give them ample notice because at that point in time, we didn't expect there to be any attrition within our music program here at the high school. So we let them know that based on the numbers and the overall equitability of being able to continue to staff it at that level, we didn't foresee that being sustainable for us long-term. So we wanted to give them a year to plan. There's a lot of different ways to address the issue. Increase the enrollment in choir and other music electives so that we need the FTE demands. or add endorsements so that teachers within the program can pick up some other sections. Our theater teacher is already doing that. He's picked up a section of psychology, which is great. And so we gave them that year. In the interim, right after that conversation happened, we did have natural attrition here at the high school. So rather than hiring someone at a 1.0 and then needing to reduce them in the very near future, it makes sense to take advantage of that natural attrition and make the adjustment at that time. So when we first met with the teachers, we let them know that we were looking at 0.6 FTE. Based on the numbers. Another thing to note is right before that, we also had to add 0.7 FTE in addition to what we would normally staff Mount Si High School at for the first time in several years, because in order to maintain our existing teachers that didn't have students within their programs meeting those demands of their FTE and them not having other endorsement areas to plug them into other content areas, we didn't feel comfortable telling students that they couldn't take the classes they actually did request. So we had some higher requests in some of our CTE programs. So we had to, unexpectedly add an additional 0.7 of FTE here so that we wouldn't have to cut classes that students had requested to take. So that was an additional thing to note. At the time, we said we were looking at a 0.6 FTE, and we heard right away from our music teachers, back to the advocacy, that one of the challenges with that is that we would have to they were concerned about having to cut the different ways in which we offer the programming here within choir. Specifically, they've arranged our choir program here, which they feel like is attributed to their success, to be a variety of like vocal ranges and levels. So we have quite a variety of choir classes here, and they were really worried with that reduction of that impacting their ability to group students according to like their vocal ranges and abilities. So in looking at that and hearing from that hearing that request, we looked at everything, and we pulled some data. Some of the relevant data that I just wanted to share is that based on the numbers, our choir was looking to be our lowest staff to, and music electives, sorry, choir and music electives, looking to be our lowest teacher to student ratio across our subject areas, except for special education and multilingual, and then a couple of areas where there's like safety involved, like woodshop and welding. So the average of other classes across Mount Si High School is around 1 to 29. Specifically, math and science and world language are 1 to 28. ELA and social studies are 1 to 29. Visual arts and PE are 1 to 30 and 1 to 34. So there definitely was some inequities there within the ratio. And then we also pulled some data. We reached out to schools that are between 1,900 and 2,100 students, because there's quite a bit of difference in school size and how FD can work and how many electives you can offer. And we found the average, not every high school of those sizes got back to us, but within, we had quite a number that did. And within that, the average dedicated choir FTE of high schools our size is around a 0.6. And even with the change, we're still at a 1.2 specifically dedicated to choir, not music electives and band. And then total music FTE, so including choir, band, and music electives, the average of schools our size is around a 2.6, and with the change, we're at a 4.1. So we're still providing a lot more resources than most schools our size, even with this change. One other concern that we heard is that they were worried that a 0.6 or 0.7 wouldn't draw a great applicant pool. I'm happy to share that we did have 23 applicants, and we're really excited about our hire. Her name is Amber Johnson, and she's accepted the position. We're really excited. She was a great candidate. Ultimately, the actual decision, again, came down to the 0.7. Instead of a 1.0 with the natural attrition. And specifically the way that we accounted for that is there was one music elective, so it's outside of the choir, concern around students who are really dedicated to a particular program. There was a music elective called Music Collaboration. It had 14 students. That is, we typically don't offer electives that get under 20 registrations, because especially when they're singletons, once you get to like conflicts, like if they wanted to take, let's say, French 3 and music collaboration, and they're both offered the same period, naturally a handful of students from even the initial registrations, that number lowers. Some of them also moved on to running start. So we almost always collapse classes that get under 20 registrations. And we didn't in this case prior to the natural attrition, because we were preserving the FTE of existing staff members. So that is a 0.1. And then the other change we made is the intermezzo class was co-taught with 42 students. And in reaching out to our neighbors, it's quite typical to have choir classes taught with just one teacher in the high 40s and low 50s for schools our size. So the teacher will just have to differentiate, much like, you know, in our ELA classes, in our 9th grade ELA classes, we have students reading between a 4th grade level and a 12th grade or college level, and they're differentiating to those 33, 34 students. And in PE, we have students with variety levels of flexibility and fitness and strength, and they're differentiating to classes upwards of 40. So that is the specific change. We did allow the teachers voice if they had other ways in which they wanted to distribute that 0.7 FTE, if they saw a better way to apply the changes, they could, but that was our best opportunity. So with all of that, the decision was not about reducing our commitment to choir, even though I know it can feel that way anytime there's a change like that. We intentionally adjusted the original staffing proposal from the 0.6 to the 0.7 specifically in an effort to preserve what we heard loud and clear, which is that the ability to differentiate between vocal range and ability is a key part of why our program is as competitive as it is. And so we believe that this change allows us to be equitable among the other class sizes at Mount Si High School and keep them competitive as best as we can. That is a little bit more able for us to sustain that financially, especially as we have that extra 0.7 we already had to do to keep kids in the classes that they did select and register for. So we're always open to feedback, and again, if there's other ways to distribute the FTE and things like that, I know we're looking into the co-curricular piece of it because it doesn't change the amount of concerts that these folks have to attend and field trips. That's one area we're still looking into. That's what I have to share about choir if anyone has any questions.
There was a lot of detail in there. In your comparison, when you looked at other schools, was one of them Garfield in Seattle?
I'm sure they were one of the ones that we reached out to. Basically, I reached out to, I would have to look at exactly who got back to me. But because I know one of the other questions that somebody had asked was, are they as competitive as we are? Like, do they enter into the same music competitions? I reached out to anyone that had in Washington State that's current enrollment is between 1,900 and 2,100 that has a choir program. I'm not sure if they were one of the ones that got back to me.
And then we also heard public testimony that one of the guys said that their band wasn't available anymore through this. Is that correct, or was that just there wasn't interest in the section as you were explaining if there's under 20?
None of this had any impact on band. I don't know if music collaboration, if the student was referring to music collaboration as an elective.
No, it was like a boys choir.
No, I don't, unless there's a different communication happening from teachers around how they'd like to apply the changes that haven't been shared with me or the principal yet, no.
Andrea, can you share the other music electives just so they understand what those are?
Sure, we have like piano, we have AP Music Theory, and I don't want to forget, World Drumming. There's a couple other music electives that aren't what you would necessarily attribute to like band, choir. Those are, I'm not sure if I missed any. Did I miss some? Music technology, yeah. Any other questions?
Well, I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that was put together. It might seem that we are reducing the capacity. However, as long as the programs are supported well, I feel that it was it's again, you talked about sustainability. It's also a big part of the district. You have to look at the big picture and support all the extracurricular activities and how do we balance it. I appreciate the thought put in and the collaboration, and yeah, I think they're making the right decisions.
I'm assuming that if there's larger enrollment next year or the year after, that we go back up to a 1.0.
Yeah, that is, thank you. That's one of my, I think the one bullet point that I missed is that it's much easier to add, to a person than it is to take it from somebody who's, budgeted their livelihood around that. So posting it such as at least someone's comfortable starting out at that FTE. And then as the FTE changes and grows, we always adjust based on what our enrollment is in that particular year. So absolutely.
want to encourage anyone that ever hears this, please advocate for school funding, because these slices of margin that cumulatively affect district budgets would not be quite so critical if the margins were not already so small for what we need to accomplish with what we have.
Agree. I wish I had enough to give
Yeah.
everybody with exactly what they wanted. Yeah.
And many French 4 students throughout the years have felt the same. So anyway, I did not add that to belittle, just to be light. It's a tough decision, and I appreciate you working with the music team to figure out what to do with it.
Cool. Thank you. Sure. If it is, yeah. Yes, sir.
We'd ask that you use the mic so anyone listening online could hear you.
I just have a couple clarifying questions. I think what Gary was asking about was the student Jaden had talked about how he was going to be the choir director, the student director for the tenor bass choir, which was going to be the first time we were offering it as a class next year. So that has been eliminated to combine back with intermezzo. So now that there's no longer the 2 teachers, that is disappearing. So that opportunity he was talking about, the first all-male choir, is gone. Is that correct?
That would be something I'd have to speak to the.
Okay.
We didn't get into that level of detail in terms of them talking about how they would make changes. Our hope was that they'd be able to keep students enrolled within intermezzo as it was planned and just differentiate as a teacher within 42 students. And if they've decided that that's not feasible and needed to collapse one of those in order to make that change, then that was a decision made by the teachers and then communicated to staff or to families outside of myself. So it sounds like maybe that was communicated to them, but I'm unaware.
The other part that was brought up at the last meeting was the concern about the stipend that the music directors get for after-school rehearsals and concerts, and I believe somebody raised the question about how does that look at a 0.7 versus at a 1.
Yeah, that's the part that I mentioned that we're still looking into that. Typically, it's proportional, so it's usually like if it's a 0.7 position and it's co-curricular, we just haven't had a part-time in a co-curricular area in a while. So that's historically how we've done it. If it's like a 0.6 DECA teacher, like let's say you're at a school of 900 and you don't have the demands, then you'd be 0.6 of a portion of that stipend. So as of right now, the way it's set would be 70% of the co-curricular stipend would be attached to the 0.7, but that is the area that we're still going to look into because we acknowledge that that's tricky because it doesn't change the amount of events and stuff like that. So we're still working on that piece.
Okay, perfect. And then just my last question was somebody had brought up that the levy that was passed for the arts and how that works when, like, where is this 0.3 now going to, I guess?
Yeah, I think that it's hard because I think everyone sees themselves like reflected in the levy, and we get. I would go to like the earlier slides if you want to look up at any of like, I think Dan and Ryan's presentations is we get a small portion of funding from the state that doesn't cover the cost of entire programs, athletics, nurses, music, like it's all, and so we use our levy dollars to fund all of those programs beyond what the state gives us, because what the state gives us is not enough for any of those programs. So when we go out to the community and talk about it, we're talking about the gap between what we get from the state and what we offer in our schools. It's not like that there's a specific amount from the levy that's paying for this specific amount of FTE here. It's just in general, when you look at what we get for even teacher salaries, it's significantly lower. So to pay any of our music teachers, it counts to, they don't give us anything to cover the cost of those co-curricular stipends. So it covers, the levy dollars could use to cover all of our co-curricular. I don't know if you would add anything in addition to that as a money bag guy.
I would say, I think your slide here on like how our staffing compares to other districts of our size or high schools of our size shows that the levy is still funding a number of staff in addition to what people typically have. I think in our one of our focuses in the levy was also in middle school music, where we have 2 teachers, and with declining enrollment, that's going to be something we have to continue to look at as well. Similar to the declining enrollment in here, I think when we ran the levy, we weren't anticipating the enrollment at the high school to drop. And so that was assuming like we had similar demand as in typical years. Those would be the two things I'd add to that, yeah.
I think, I know additionally we shared in regard to art, the specific ask was to add the elementary art specialist. That was one of the main advertisements or asks and items that were brought up from the community was to add elementary art and
Yeah, nothing
outside of
for
music.
music was in the ads. It was just maintaining the existing levy amount that kind of covers that gap, if that makes sense. And then, yeah, the new art ad was elementary art.
Firstly, I want to thank you for guiding us so thoughtfully through your process and helping us understand where all of that's coming from. And for the reminder that, of course, what we need to advocate for always is an increase in funding across the board so that we don't have to make so many difficult decisions. But I also was wondering if you could speak to where that 0.3, if that 0.3 has been reallocated anywhere, as well as helping us understand what kind of sample size we're looking at in those comparison numbers with other districts. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you remember any of the school names that did get back to you and contribute.
Yeah. I can, okay, let me make sure I got all your questions. So the first part was if that at 0.3 has been allocated. It hasn't, because we had already gotten an additional 0.7 just to make sure that students were in classes that we were able to offer some of those, like we had a huge increase in AP business class, like a whole new FTE. So in order to make sure we were able to offer those so that the students got their first choice in electives, we just didn't, we were able to keep that at 0.7. So we haven't put that anywhere else. The second question.
What kind of sample size are we looking at when we look at those comparisons to other high schools? How many schools?
I think I reached out, don't quote me, I can get you the specifics, but I think I reached out to probably about 25 high schools. And I would say like 10 to 11 replied. And the ones that replied were most of people that I have relationships with that probably recognized my name in an email, and other people probably thought it was spam. So I heard from basically Lake Washington School District, Issaquah School District, and some Kent School District schools, which are all districts that I have relationships in. I had a couple random principals that got back to me, like from like Pasco or Kent, one of the Tri-City schools that's as large as us. But I can get you the exact list of which schools did respond and which schools I reached out to.
Work in schools enough to understand
Yep. Yep. So that's but I can get the exact information.
I have one more for you.
Oh, sure.
I wonder if, and again, ballpark is great. I wonder if beyond the SPED offerings, you could give us an understanding of if there are classes that are running those smaller class sizes.
Yeah, I can get you even a specific list if people want it. But we have special ed and ML are always a little bit low. We run our like wood shop welding classes where there's like heavy equipment. Usually we try to cap those at like 28, and then with enrollment, it's sometimes they run around like 26 and 27, and it varies year to year a little bit. We have some other class sizes that like randomly will dip low based on like changes in running start, or kids who drop, like they maybe are a senior and they think they're going to take a year-long AP class, and then they decided to lighten their load with senioritis hits. And so those might start at like 27 and then dip down to like 22 second semester. Another example would be we try really hard to make sure we always offer and run the third year of world language classes, because students, a lot of times universities will say they require 3 years in order to be a quality applicant. And so sometimes like a French 3 or a German 3 might dip down and we might not have enough, but we don't want to collapse those because that would change a student, and they've already at this point invested in 2 years of language. So that would be another example of a class that we would run slightly smaller if we had to, in order to not have it impact a student academically. But I can get a list of any other classes that have run low. There's always like some random surprises in there from like year to year. But I can it's a public record requestable. I can show you like how many classes were offered in 25, 26, and what size they were throughout the year, and which ones changed like second semester with drops.
Okay, I have one more for you.
Sure.
Thank you for being patient as I ask all these questions. I know that one of the considerations that you expressed was about safety. And of course, when I think about the average choir or band rehearsal, I'm not thinking, gosh, these kids are in danger. But I was also wondering, given the extensive travel planning that teachers are responsible for, whether there was any consideration made for smaller class sizes to accommodate all of that safety planning and consideration.
That's a great question. I think that I wouldn't, because like FTE in a day-to-day class doesn't necessarily translate to the planning of a safety of a field trip. I wouldn't say that that was a consideration in like class size and the equitability and sustainability of the staffing that in that way. I will say one of the things that I found out from a couple other schools is they made a choice to run some of their choir and band classes high in order to have a 4-hour admin assistant who does all of their like field trip paperwork, and they made that trade so the teachers were willing to teach higher class sizes and differentiate more in order to get that support to lighten their workload. And I found that fascinating, and it can be a conversation we have at some point. I will say that we did make a change here with our ASB and activities director with the intentionality of supporting our music teachers and just all of our teachers that take a lot of field trips with separating the leadership class and dedicating more time for the ASB director to be able to be a support to teachers. And so we hope that it's too early to tell, but we hope that that has a huge impact. Shannon Etnier, I don't know if anyone, I love her. I think she's going to kick some serious butt with that. Real type A detailed person. So she stands ready to support field trips, and we're going to wait and kind of see how that model plays out and then talk about what other supports might be needed for that. So that's more of the safety piece. And then like the ratios, if they have to have 1 to 10 with chaperones when they're on the actual field trip. So that's more of an impact than I would say like general day-to-day class size. Okay, thank you so much. You're welcome. Yeah, no problem.
Andrea, I just want to add, I know some of our educators in the room, change always feels like maybe a lesser commitment or a pulling away. We love our music programs. We are so proud of the students and the educators we have in those programs. We are fortunate, and we are glad that we are, and we don't want to be less committed to our music program. I know that it feels that way sometimes, but I know so many people who are very much committed. So I just want to reassure you, this is change sometimes happens, but it does not mean we don't care how this goes. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much for your participation and passion. All right, moving on to the next item. It would be the budget review this time.
All right. Thank you, Ryan. Assistant Superintendent Stokes up to review the budget.
Hi, this is our draft budget. We will look for adoption at the next board meeting in August. So we'll walk you through this. There are still changes that will be happening between now and August as we continue to fine tune. It is a lot to go through, and so I want to just give you that first look, answer any questions, take any feedback from you that will help us develop any fine tuning over this next month. So this is the summary of the funds that we are in charge of: general fund, ASB, debt service, capital projects, and transportation. We'll go through all of those. You can see here on the left, it's maybe hard on the screen here, we're currently budgeting a draw on fund balance of 1.4 million in our general fund, and we'll talk about that. And I wanted to give you some of those inputs that are driving those changes in our general fund. We'll start with enrollment and staffing. So our enrollment projections for next year are a slight decrease compared to this current year. We've continued to see decreases in the elementary population. Typically, each kindergarten class has been lower than we had in the past, and so that lower bubble is starting to go through the system. So it's starting to enter into middle school, and in a few years, then it'll start to enter into high school.
Ryan, because we were talking about staffing, about how much either by student or by a group of students is it in funding when we lose that amount? Can you give us
Each
an
student
idea?
in state funding is about, I think, $11,000. So 40 students less is going to be about $500,000 less in funding.
Thank you.
Our kindergarten enrollment, we continue to monitor. This I updated, I think, from what I sent you guys last week. In May, as of May, our kindergarten registrations were quite a bit lower. And then we picked up some in June. So we're looking pretty close. We typically pick up some over the summer. So it looks like we'll be okay on the kindergarten side. No surprises there. But that's one of those inputs that we don't really know until we see them in August. And so we continue to monitor that. But basically what this shows, I think, is what we've budgeted is in the ballpark and is a good approximation. From a staffing perspective, this is elementary class size. And so when we talk about elementary class size, we're talking about actual students in a first grade class or a second grade class. So this table on the top shows you a history of our class sizes as well as what the projected class size is for next year. One of the challenges that we face is the state funds K-3 class size at 17 and 4th through 5th at 27.8. And so when you try to move from 3rd grade to 4th grade, those numbers don't equate. If I have 4 sections of 3rd grade and then turn those into 3 sections of 4th and 5th grade, those numbers don't magically work out as far as magically being at 20, going from 17 to 27. So we try to focus a lot of our class size efforts on the K-3 because that's where the research shows that the lower class size really are meaningful. And so the fluctuations that you see in 4th and 5th a lot of times have to deal with just how each group advances and each school building advances. The other challenge that we're facing is that as those lower cohorts are coming through the system, that means fewer sections of 4th and 5th grade. So we have a couple of elementaries that may only have 2 or 3 5th grade teachers, and so that really, a change in 5 students can be a change in 2, between 2 classes would be 2 or 3 average on that average. So that 4th and 5th average fluctuates depending on those factors. So that's the actual class size average in the classrooms, and then what the state looks at is what they call the demonstrated class size, which includes all of your specialists. So our art, music, PE, library, our WIN and math reading specialists that are all also taking students during the day, and that's different from the secondaries. The students go from teacher to teacher, while as an elementary, they're kind of assigned to their classroom teacher and then have specialists pushing in or pulling out to provide planning. So you'll see that our demonstrated class size has continued to be quite nice. And last year we were even lower than the year before. And then we're adding some art teachers, and so I would anticipate that demonstrated class size might be even lower next year.
Ryan, the state funding model is based on 17?
Yes, on the demonstrated, yeah.
On the demonstrated.
Yeah. So we got our report from this year on the demonstrated class size and what the state would call K-3 compliance. And so I just pulled our neighboring districts to see kind of how we compare. We have the lowest K-3 class size of any of our neighbors as far as demonstrated class size. I found it interesting to see that Tahoma, Issaquah, and Bellevue did not meet the 17 threshold, which means they're leaving state funding on the table. They're not receiving the full amount of state funding that they could have been receiving. Bellevue doesn't surprise me because they are in some pretty substantial financial problems, and so they probably are pushing class sizes higher. Leaving the state funding on the table was probably just part of, they couldn't offset that with some of the other costs. But I found that interesting that some of our larger neighbors are not meeting the demonstrated class size. From a staffing overall summary, these are our certificated and classified FTE comparisons. The attachment, the budget summary that I have attached in the agenda includes some capacity positions. We'll talk about that capacity when we go through revenues and expenditures. So if you're trying to reconcile the 26-27 staffing to the report on the attachment, they won't reconcile because there's capacity positions sitting in there. So these are really to show what we think actual staffing has been in the prior years and what we think it will be for 26-27, so that it's a true comparison. So slight increases in certificated, slight increases in classified, and not too much, so a little bit here or there. On the certificated side, some of those increases, as I mentioned, for elementary art, that was a specific funding in the EP&O levy, although we don't start collecting that funding until 2027. So for this year, we're only receiving essentially half of the funding for those additional teachers as the levy kicks in, but we wanted to get those started and implemented once the levy had passed. And then there's some general in the certificated side, some general adjustments, K-12 based on enrollment. You saw a little bit of a report on that tonight. At the high school level, how class sizes are rolling out, and we have a tentative agreement with the SVEA union, and so we've kind of started working that, the terms of that tentative agreement through the budget as well. So that is impacting our certificated staffing. On the classified, we have done a really good job this last year of hiring bus drivers. And so that budget reflects the efforts of getting more bus drivers in. That's giving us a little bit more flexibility and some other things that we're looking at. And then just paraeducators are based on needs and demands, either in special education or in some of our buildings that are growing. From a staffing piece, I think another thing just that is important for the board to know, the state gives us an inflationary factor. They call it, they use it, the inflationary factor is called the implicit price deflator, and it is a regional inflationary factor. It is more conservative than other inflationary factors, which shouldn't surprise you from a governmental agency trying to project inflation. But the IPD is what they apply to the funding formula. So IPD for this year is 2.6%. So what the state funds per pupil is increasing by 2.6%. We, however, have more staff than the state thinks we should in their funding formula, and we've talked about that a lot, and our wages are higher than what the state funds. And so when we pass that IPD along all of our staff, it requires more levy funding. So I calculated or tried to approximate, it's a little bit more tricky with CTE and special ed, their funding formulas, but the cost for 1% of IPD to be applied to all of our staffing is about $300,000. So for the 26-27 school year, where we're getting 2.6% IPD, that requires an additional $800,000 in our local levy just to pass the IPD on to all of our staff. And the state projects 2.7% the next year and 2.5% the following year. So we've tried to incorporate that in our levy renewal, and that's part of one of the reasons why the levy needed to increase, is just to continue to maintain our staffing levels with a higher IPD requires more levy investment because of how those mechanics work. So it's something I think that's important for us to remember, because we all tend to just think the state's giving us inflation and we're going to pass that on to our employees, and it's funded, and it isn't. And so even just keeping up with high inflation is a challenge for school districts. We have seen some school districts take the funding that the state provides and spread that among all of the staff, not giving the full IPD when they are having greater financial difficulty. And there are some who just don't pass the IPD along because depending on their level of financial distress. But anyway, I think that was just an important consideration for the board to remember, just the cost of IPD. It's not free. I've got a few things sprinkled in here that we have to report on as part of the budget adoption. One of the things that we're supposed to share is what the state calls physical, social, and emotional support compliance. The state, as you know, over the last few years, we've highlighted how the apportionment that the state gives for certain funding or the staffing is woefully inadequate. In this case, PSES is things like nurses and counselors, psychologists, social workers. And so the state started increasing some of their staffing ratios in these areas, and we're worried that we would use that money for something else. And so they want us to show that we are putting those staff into the schools that they are funding. So this shows that we have almost 10 FTE more than what the state funds in this area. So we are in compliance. The compliance is in total. A few other things just to remember: sixth graders at the state apportionment level is reported as elementary. So a portion of our middle school counselors are classified here as elementary. And then the high certificated are why we're showing as low in that is we charge some of our counselors to the CTE program, because they're also supporting CTE students. And so this is a factor of kind of how the state is calculating this. We actually have more PSES staff in the high school than what this shows. So we're compliant, that's good. The state isn't going to say that we owe them money back. So if we go to revenues, just high-level summary of some of the ways that we slice and dice the budget. So on the revenue side, there's a few different categories that are in the attachment of the budget summary. Local taxes, the increase projected is the levy increase. Local non-tax, I'm currently showing a decrease. I think that will probably change. That's one of the areas that I didn't get to as far as reviewing our donations, our interest, and some of our rentals. So I think in August, I would anticipate some change in that. It'll be on the revenue and the expenditure side in all likelihood. State general is the general apportionment, so we're projecting a 1.9% increase, and that really is IPD of 2.6 with a slight decline in enrollment. State special also is special education, IPD of 2.6. An interesting thing that we noted is last year, students qualifying in special education rose 5% during the year. So we had a significant increase in students qualifying last year. And so that is going to significantly increase both the revenue side and the expenditure side that you'll see there. And then a safety net increase. Safety net is where we qualify for additional funding for students whose costs to provide the necessary services are much higher than the state funding formula, and we can apply for safety net. Kim Mackey's done a great job capturing those costs and getting them to the state, and so we're continuing to see as our costs rise, the safety net revenue increasing as well. So that's kind of driving those increases there. Revenues from other is pretty minimal change. That is our foundation grants and the SBIRT grant. And then other financing sources is our tech levy reimbursement that comes from capital projects and comes into general fund. And it because general fund is the only place we can pay for salaries and stipends and certain technology related costs. And so that gets reimbursed from the capital projects fund, but it's all tech levy. Any questions on revenue?
Oh, no, I was just going to ask you if you knew what the total special ed, it went up 5. Where did it land?
What do you, sorry?
The safety,
total
the
percent?
total, you said
Total
it,
percentage?
of special ed students, and then I realized you probably don't know.
I don't
and
know.
you're on a roll, just
But I
keep
could find it.
going.
I could find it, but yeah.
It's okay.
I'll have
Thank
it for
you.
the next presentation.
Okay.
Just the state apportionment combined is another way to just look at that and just showing it. It's an increase of about 5%. On the expenditure side, again, there's a number of ways to slice and dice the budget. These are categories that the state has in the budget summary, and so this is coming off of what you might see in the attachments. Regular instruction has an increase of 5%. 2.6 of that is passing IPD along, and then there's some other costs that we've estimated related to the tentative contract agreement with the teachers union. Special education, you see an increase in expenditures as well. Again, more qualifying students. It kind of correlates to the revenue increase, more services that we're providing as things like behavior and student needs continue to increase. Transportation costs for students going out of district continue to increase, and some of that cost increase is offset by some assumed increases in safety net. Special ed is another one where you would think the state would fully fund all special education costs since it's mandatory that we provide those services, and it is not. You know, a few $1 million per year is levy funded, unfortunately. Or fortunately, if you're trying to provide those services and the state isn't funding it. So we're grateful for our community support in that way.
Yeah, for that, we are grateful to the community
Sure.
for supporting. Yeah.
For sure. Vocational ed is our CTE programs. This is another one where I ran out of time balancing it, so there might be some changes in here. We have a minimum expenditure threshold, and so we just, after we get everything else locked in, then we kind of do some balancing still left to do in August, so that might change a little. Compensatory education is, and I guess I should go back to the revenues just so that they make sense. In the federal special of that $7 million, so when we budget, we are budgeting $4.2 million in revenue and $4.2 million in expenditures that we call capacity. The board gives us authority to spend funds, and if we go over that amount, we get in trouble, and we would have to do a budget revision and have the board approve the budget revision. That's a lot of effort, and so what we do is we put an equal amount of revenue cushion and an equal amount of expenditure cushion in the budget, so that if we get 100 more students and we need to hire a few more teachers, we're getting a little bit more revenue, and we have authority to make those expenditures. So we don't spend that cushion just to spend it, but it's a balancing factor in our budget. So when you go to the expenditure side, the 4.2 million is in the compensatory education line. And so that's the same from year to year. We use that same amount. And the reduction is just some slight reductions in our federal grants. Other instructional programs, some of that change is E-rate, which is some federal funding for some of our like fiber and technology projects. And then I'm still reviewing donations and grants similar to the revenue side. Community services, you see on the expenditure side an increase. Some of that is our daycare costs continue to go up. The tuition, we've increased tuition for daycare to try to keep that. Our goal is to have that be a break-even, cost neutral, since that is a kind of a service to our staff to help them have a place for their students, their kids to be. And then things like facility rentals and other community services, that increase is just matching some of our current costs. Support services is food service, district office, maintenance, grounds, operations, transportation. And so you see there a slight increase there. A lot of that is IPD. We have a curriculum adoption that we've been working through, so there's some costs in there for the purchase of that adoption. And then just some general increases, right? While IPD is 2.6%, there are other inflation that is actual inflation. So our food service has a different inflationary factor. Their costs are going up by 4.1%. Our insurance is going up by 8%, and we were lucky. A different insurance pool in the area, the Puget Sound Risk Management Pool. We are a different insurance group, SIAW. Anyway, Puget Sound, the districts who are part of Puget Sound Risk Management were surprised with 50 to 60% increases in their insurance this year. And so for, I think, Tahoma, that's about a $3 million surprise. And so that is something that we're keeping an eye on. What we're seeing is a lot of costs via settlements, and those costs then get passed to the districts because we're somewhat self-insured. And so there was a lot of districts that weren't really prepared for a 50 or 60% increase. So ours was 8%. In the past years, we've had some larger increases, but that's a pretty big hit. And that's similar to utilities. Everyone's utilities have kind of skyrocketed a bit, and so we're trying to keep that in our expenditures as well. There's another, again, this is a different way to slice and dice the budget. So it's looking at certificated salaries, classified salaries, benefits, supplies and materials, purchase services. And what I just want to reflect to the board here is as you look at these amounts as a percentage of the budget, you can see that they're fairly proportional as we would expect. Certificated salaries as a proportion is going up as part of the increased costs with a settlement. Employee benefits has increased. They reduced last year, and then we don't really control the employee benefits. The state, most of that is the medical insurance costs, and so the state kind of sets those between medical insurance and retirement are the two largest cost drivers there. So just from a proportionality perspective, this year's budget is not that dissimilar to the last few years of budget. A few other just factors. The average certificated salary per FTE is projected to go up by about 6.2%. Our staff continue to advance along the salary schedule. Our staff mix is what we used to call it. The seniority, the age of our staff members used to be an average staff member had about 11 years of experience. We're now at like 14 or 15 years of experience. When McCleary came out and state funding was higher and class sizes were getting reduced, everyone was hiring a lot of staff, and so that meant you were hiring a lot of young teachers. And now with enrollment kind of freezing over the last few years, we aren't hiring as many young teachers, and so our general staffing is continuing to get older. The state, of course, doesn't address that when your staff mix gets higher, and so that's an interesting component as far as what the average salary is. Average classified salaries are increasing just a little bit. Most of that is IPD. Another thing that we have to show, again, the state has given a little bit more in MSOX, which is materials, supplies, and other costs, so the paper and fuel and utilities. And when this legislature gave more funding, they were worried that we would somehow magically spend that somewhere else. And so when we adopt the budget, I have to show you that the MSOX that we get from the state, which is $10 million, is less than what we are budgeting, which is $17 million. So this is just for us to show the state that the money they're giving us for MSOX is not getting spent somewhere else. They were very worried about that. That's all general fund. Any questions before I move on to the other funds? Okay. So the Associated Student Body, the ASBs, those budgets are adopted by the students, and so we kind of review them to make sure they look okay and adopt them as they have been approved by the students. They typically show a draw on fund balance, as you can see at the bottom right, of $200,000 for next year, and they typically are closer to balanced by the time they get to actuals. We have them put in some capacity as well in case they decide to do some things. And especially for ASBs, we try to say, we don't want you to save up a fund balance in ASBs because you're generating the revenues from an ASB card. It should be spent on the students that are buying those cards instead of saving for the future. And so they do a pretty good job on that. Debt service is how we pay our principal and interest on outstanding bonds that have been sold. So bonds that are used to construct the high school and Timber Ridge. We still have some bonds on the books from the construction of, maybe not Cascade View. Cascade View is probably almost done. But so this is just principal and interest payments. Last year we refinanced in school. They call it refunding, but it's essentially refinancing your outstanding debt. Last year we refinanced some of that debt and saved $1 million per year for the next 9 years. So you can see that in like the principal payments, there's some savings. And we do have a potential, there's another bond sale that we did during the construction that is available for a potential refund this year. So I've got some capacity in there which is really the bond transfer fees. So it's capacity if we decide to do another refunding this year. So we'll update you on that throughout the year. That won't happen until the spring. Capital projects is the spending of those bond monies. It's also where the tech levy impact fees come through. This one, I would say, is more of a capacity, budget capacity. You can see I'm showing $15 million of capacity. I don't currently have on the books $15 million worth of projects, so this is capacity for things. So this gives us capacity to complete the Opstead improvements. We have some bond monies left for the safety and security enhancements in our other asset improvements from the 2015 bond. And we had kind of been holding that to try to maybe address single points of entry at some of our schools, pending any potential bond decisions. And so I know we're working on getting more committees related to a facilities committee. And so as that progresses through the year, we may decide that we want to pull the trigger on some of those if we know that maybe a specific building is unlikely to get addressed in a future bond or the next bond. And so I've got capacity in there if we decided to do that. If we need to spend impact fees on getting a portable somewhere, if some enrollment surprises us. And in the past, school boards have had maybe architects start working on design work if we're getting more close to running a bond, and you kind of, so that if the bond passes, you can turn around and start moving quickly on that and not lose another year of inflation on your costs. And so that could be capacity for that as well. Again, this is purely, at this point, capacity. None of those would happen without us coming to the board for approval on any of those. So transportation vehicle is strictly to purchase buses. And we get depreciation on our existing buses from the state. And then we're able to spend that to replace buses as they come off depreciation. The state, in some of their budget woes, changed the depreciation time for buses. So they used to be, I think, 10 and 12-year depreciation. Now they're 12 and 15-year depreciation. So for us, that's $100,000 less per year. It means we will just, it doesn't, it's not a negative impact. It just means we have to hold on to our buses longer. They will be generally older before they get replaced. So that's reflected here. And
it also means higher maintenance costs.
Probably, yeah. Which doesn't come out of transportation vehicle fund, that comes out of general fund, yes. So this is really just giving capacity to spend those dollars and replace the buses. We don't currently have a plan to spend all 3 million of that, but that's what's our fund balance is in there. And so we'll be working with transportation on our kind of annual bus replacement.
Excuse me. Sorry.
So the next steps between now and August, again, I would anticipate some changes. I would say while the budget currently projects a draw of 1.4 million, our fund balance has been strong, and so a draw in 1 year is not a death knell. I think it's appropriate for us to draw that down. As you guys are now experts, drawing it down over multiple years is unsustainable and problematic. And so I don't know that we would automatically be drawing that down as much next year. We'll see what costs do, but that levy increase will help where we get the full levy in 27, 28. So if you're nervous about that draw, again, I think the takeaway would be our fund balance is fairly strong right now, and so a draw of $1.5 million is not terrible. It's not ideal. We'd rather have a balanced budget, but I think we can absorb that this year and work to get closer to a balanced budget in the following year. That being said, as I noted in the presentation, there's a number of areas that I want to continue to just fine tune and relook at. HR puts in all the people into the budget, and then business office kind of works with all the MSOCs, and so it's just important to keep looking at those and make sure that we're not missing something. So we'll continue to balance those between now and August. You can expect some changes. I don't anticipate the draw on fund balance to get worse. It may get a little better, but I do anticipate some level of draw on the fund balance in the final budget. The other thing that we have to present in the budget and to the state is a 4-year projection, so I'll be working on those as we get closer to being complete with our year 1 budget. And then we have currently scheduled the budget hearing and adoption on August 13th, which is where you would take action to authorize those budgets. Any questions?
Before we meet again on August 13th, will you have an opportunity to update it with the current enrollment projections?
Yes, potentially.
Provided our parents do enroll.
Yes, I will take a look at it. Usually if we're not off by much, I don't change it, because to open it up and then run that through is a lot of work, and we have that in our capacity. And so if I'm off by 20 or 30, I may not reopen it, because that's part of the purpose of having that contingency in there, is we've got it.
Only because I know over the past 7-8 years, Ryan, how close you've been. So
Well, and
I have confidence in
I appreciate that, and hope we keep that on pace. The other challenge is by August 13th, we still won't be seeing the whites of everyone's eyes, and so we probably won't be updating it, because really the change happens. Everybody comes back to the building, and people start showing up. So unlikely that we would change. Typically what I do is if that kindergarten enrollment is lighter than we've budgeted, then I go in and lower that so that we're not overestimating our revenues. So if we're at or close, then typically I kind of just move forward on that.
Well, thank you, Ryan. Your presentations keep getting better.
Thanks.
Well, my only comment is that yes, we realize there is a draw on the fund balance. Since we have a little strength of the fund balance, so I think we'll be okay. But the goal is to have a balanced budget for next year.
Yes, totally agreed. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ryan.
All right. Moving on to the next item, we have a policy review for action items. Policy number 6881, disposal of surplus equipment and or materials. First reading. Can we pull it up? Sure. Awesome. Okay. And the changes, I don't remember.
The numbers went up.
Yeah, from
in
100 to
essence.
500.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay. Any comments?
None.
And is it all good for
Yeah,
pass it on to the consent agenda?
second reading.
Awesome. Thank you very much. All right. Next item is future meetings. And we have, like Ryan mentioned, the next board meeting is on the August 13th. However, we have a board work session on August the 3rd, specifically on strategic plan and any updates and reviews. And and then we kick off the school district again, back to school, August 20th. And
Comes real fast.
very quickly, before you know. Awesome. All right, is there any other thing, good of the order?
I have one good of the order. I want to, we've all been enjoying the World Cup. And former board member Dan Pop has reached out to the school district, and they have FIFA Seattle has technology equipment to donate to the school district. So our tech department is working with the FIFA representatives, and we will be beneficiaries of some laptops and tablets and certain other things as well. So we appreciate that donation from FIFA and have thoroughly enjoyed the World Cup along the way as well.
And the connection to FIFA through Dan.
Yeah.
Dan Pop.
Former board member remembering the Snoqualmie Valley.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Any other? Well, I want to basically, we're a few days after the 4th of July, but it's a milestone for the country, and I just wanted to wish a happy 250th.
Thank
you. US. Other than that, if nothing else, meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Ron. Good job.